650 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.
The following program is paid for by Barbara Arnwine.
It's time now for Igniting Change, a weekly provocative and empowering program where you, the listener, can ignite change. Now here's your host, Barbara Arnwine.
Get up, stand up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Igniting Change. Yes. This is our 9th anniversary, folks. We've been doing this show for 9 years to this date. I am so grateful to everyone who has been listening to Igniting Change. Yes, we know that some people call it the Black Radio Show we learned this weekend in Selma. Let me bring up my amazing co-host, the mighty head of the board of the Transformative Justice Coalition, one of the most creative, innovative, strategic, and thoughtful leaders in our country, one of the best lawyers you'll ever meet. I'm talking about none other than Daryl D. Jones, Esquire. Hey, Daryl.
Hey, Barbara, it must be Tuesday, must be noon Eastern Standard Time, because we're talking about igniting change. And what an exciting time we had down in Selma, Alabama, Barbara. We really went down there. Took John Lewis across the Edmund Pettus Bridge one more time with our placards.
Yes, we did.
And thousands of our friends joined us. Just an incredible time we had in Selma, Alabama, Barbara.
I tell you, and folks, I will, my regards to the mom who told me that she loves listening to her Black radio show down in Mississippi, that she loves listening to Igniting Change. Thank you for being our listeners all over the country. We're so grateful to you. Thanks for all the activism and the change that people are making. Today, everyone, you must. Absolutely. If you are in one of the 19 primary states, this is Super Tuesday. We want you to vote, and we just want to go through those states. Daryl, I'm going to read the Republican states, and you can read the Democrat states, because they have their own primaries, everybody. We're not being partisan. We're just telling you how it works. So the Republicans are holding primaries in the following states: Alabama, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia. And they're also holding caucuses in the states of Alaska and Utah. Daryl?
And the Democrats, Barbara, are holding primaries today. Today is your voting day. If you're in Alabama or Arkansas, California or Colorado, Maine or Massachusetts, Minnesota or North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia. Yes,
and they're also holding caucuses in the territory of American Samoa. And for those who are voting in Iowa, your caucuses was entirely by mail beginning in January, and your results will be released today to comply with the calendar. So this is so important, folks. Don't forget, we have been talking to you continuously about the 8th Circuit. Listen, for those of you in Minnesota, those of you who are voting there, don't forget what they've been trying to do to kill the Voting Rights Law Act in your states, including Alabama and Arkansas, that are also, involved in this effort. Arkansas is part of the 8th Circuit. Alabama's just bad, period, when it comes to protecting voting rights, as we heard this weekend, on Friday during that mighty hearing. But why don't we start off, Daryl, with our theme of our show today. We just want everyone to know that, as you know, we're continuous. All of our shows are interconnected, interlocked. And last week we brought to you a show on the Gen Z vote, and Gen Z leading the way. Well, let me tell you, Gen Z was dynamic in Selma. So the title of our show today is Return to the Bridge, Historic Senate Hearing in Montgomery, Transformative Justice Coalition Presence in Selma, and Vice President Harris's groundbreaking remarks. So we are so happy that we're joined today. Our first guest is Edward Ward. He's a TJC fellow, and he is also a restorative justice policy advocate and a youth crisis interventionist. Welcome to Igniting Change, Edward Ward.
I am so glad to be here. It is always a pleasure of mine. Thank you.
All right. And so, Daryl, you want to start off with the first question to Edward, because you and Edward work hand in glove to make sure that TJC did the thing in good old Selma.
Sure, Barbara. Thank you. And welcome aboard, Edward. Welcome back to Igniting Change. I tell you, this was your first time down in Selma for the Selma Jubilee. Can you share with people what that experience was like for you? Did it match your expectations?
To be honest with you, it did not match my expectations. It exceeded my expectations. A lot of what I saw when I went to Selma, and I'll tell you the most powerful part for me was not crossing the bridge, but standing there looking at the bridge. Because whenever I looked at the bridge, I saw it in the history books. I saw the bloodied bodies, the bloodied heads, the bent bodies in the history books. But to stand there in that spot and to look at the bridge and to capture the full essence of the moment, that was the most powerful thing for me. It wasn't seeing the vice president. It wasn't marching. It was being in the moment and seeing and taking in all of the history that happened at that time. The people who were darn near killed just to cross the bridge. So that moment for me meant everything. It far exceeded my expectations.
Wow. And Edward, when I think about you, you're from Chicago, you live in Illinois. I believe this was your first time in Alabama, right?
Yes, it was my first time in Alabama. I mean, I have a lot of states on my bucket list, and I got to tell you, Alabama was not one of many, but having it on, being able to go and to cross that bridge, and I'm like, I've got to come back to Alabama. There's so much rich history here. So much more that needs to be done, especially when I'm there and you see the history right before you walk across the bridge, but then to be surrounded by the community and look at how country has almost forgotten about the people of Selma. And so I think that it's the responsibility of mine and of the country to continue to go to Selma and to make sure we do the work necessary to help the folks of Selma become better in terms of their living conditions.
Amen. And Daryl, you have some questions for me, I believe.
Oh yeah, Barbara. As part of the Selma Jubilee celebration this time through, Barbara, we had something special that occurred, something that had not happened previously at one of these Selma Jubilees. There was a field hearing that Senator LaFonza Butler put together. Barbara, can you share with our listeners, why having this Senate hearing was important? What was it all about?
Yes, when I heard that Senator Butler was joining the Senate, had been appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom of California to replace the deceased Senator Dianne Feinstein, I immediately said, what a beautiful thing, knowing that she had headed up Emily's list, that she's a black woman, that she had a real commitment to the state. I knew she would be amazing. And when I saw her shortly after her appointment, the first thing I said to her was field hearing. I understand you're going to be on the Judiciary Committee. You're going to be heading up the subcommittee on the Constitution. What about a field hearing to talk about voting rights and why we need to pass federal legislation to address all this voter suppression and all these issues? And she said, I'm new. I'm barely staffed up, but can you tell me when can we do such a thing? And I said, Selma. And this was way back in November. She said, well, I can't do it. I said, no, the Jubilee is perfect. timing to do it. That gives you time to build it up. It would be fantastic. And to my other surprise, when I told, my friends and others that I had this conversation, they looked at me like I had two horns growing out of the side of my head because they just didn't think it was a logical thing to request. But to my other surprise, Senator Butler was persistent, and she made history because there has never, ever in the history of the United States been a field hearing of Congress held right after the introduction of a major Voting Rights Act. And yes, on last Thursday, Congress introduced the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And everybody knows that we are huge on supporting, when I say we, TJC, and I hope all of you are huge on supporting the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, but also the Freedom to Vote Act, which she mentioned during the field hearing. The field hearing was outstanding, folks. We had, we had the amazing Shalala Dowdy, who was one of the plaintiffs in the good old, Milligan case that actually ended up with a new congressional district that has the potential to elect a black congressperson from Alabama. And Shalala is a major in the still holds her major title in the Army. She's an amazing woman. And we had Latasha Brown, who testified, and of course most people know she's an Alabama native also, and that she is the co-founder of Black Voters Matters. Selma, born native. We also had Ms. Hattis, who was there to talk about, the major, difficulties that people who are disabled are facing in the state of Alabama. She was fantastic. We learned so much, but what we also learned, Daryl, is that these voter suppressors aren't finished. Do you realize that as we were holding a hearing that they were also talking about SB 1, which is a bill that would put people in jail in Alabama if they try to assist anybody with filling out the forms, the complicated forms that you need to apply for your absentee ballot. Can you imagine? They want to put people in jail for helping people to vote. Unbelievable. So there was a lot of testimony about that. We had a press conference prior to the hearing that even though it was storming, raining, cats and dogs, lightning and thunder, folks still came out to the press conference, to my other shock, and they pretty much filled up the interpretive center on Alabama State University's campus where the hearing was held. Daryl, it was something to behold.
And Barbara, I got to ask you, has there been a field hearing in the past that has occurred on an HBCU campus? Are you aware of any HBCU campus field hearings that are sponsored by Congress?
No, actually I'm not. And I've been to a number of field hearings, and that, really makes it also beautiful, not only that it was on the HBCU campus, but it was at the Interpretive Center, which is one of three monuments in the state of Alabama that allows people to learn. You go in, and it's like a big museum. There's three centers, one in Selma, one in Lowndes County, and one in Montgomery. And they're all tied to that historic march from Selma to Montgomery, which at the conclusion we were able to have President Johnson said that he was going to push for voting rights legislation to be passed, seeing all the beatings and the evil that happened on the Pettus Bridge when the people first tried to march with John Lewis in the 600. I tell you, every time, like Edward was saying, Edward, I know what you're talking about, to look at that bridge and then to walk it, and to think that you're walking in the footsteps of Amelia Boynton, who they knocked unconscious for trying to march for her voting rights, to think that you're walking in the footsteps of, the mighty John Lewis, who is our personal emblem, and he is everything to the Transformative Justice Coalition, but also to think that you walk in the steps of Joe